What if the traditions we cherish today were once born from rituals so chilling, they're now buried deep under centuries of shame? Ancient societies, in their pursuit of power, survival, and even enlightenment, practiced customs that seem utterly unthinkable by modern standards. From sacrifices made to gods who demanded the ultimate offering, to peculiar rites intended to ensure prosperity or ward off misfortune, these practices once thrived openly, shaping the very fabric of civilization. Yet, as time marched forward, they were deemed too dark, too dangerous, or too morally questionable to endure. Today, we'll uncover 15 of these forbidden ancient practices, rituals, and traditions that history tried to erase, each steeped in mystery, power, and intrigue. What secrets do they still whisper to us from the past? Stay with us as we journey through the shadows of history to uncover the forbidden practices that shaped humanity in ways you might never expect. Now turning to one of the most chilling and controversial practices of ancient times, human sacrifices. In civilizations like the Aztecs, Mayans, and Druids, this ritual was not only common but deeply woven into the fabric of their beliefs and traditions. These societies saw human sacrifices as a way to maintain harmony with the gods, secure bountiful harvests, and stave off natural disasters. The Aztecs, for instance, believed that the sun itself required human blood to rise each day, leading to grand ceremonies at temples like those in Tenochtitlan, where thousands of individuals would lose their lives in a single ritual. The Mayans, too, performed these sacrifices, often using captives from battles, believing that the offering of a human life was the ultimate gift to appease their deities. Meanwhile, the Druids, shrouded in mystery, were said to conduct sacrifices to ensure prosperity and protection, often tied to their sacred oak groves. These rituals weren't carried out arbitrarily. They were seen as essential acts of devotion that upheld the balance of the world. However, as societies evolved and moral frameworks shifted, these practices began to face scrutiny and outrage. The stark brutality of ripping life away became impossible to reconcile with emerging ethical and spiritual beliefs. As a result, human sacrifices were gradually abandoned, remembered now as a haunting chapter of history that reveals how far humanity was willing to go in its pursuit of divine favor and cosmic order. But this is just the beginning. Our journey into the shadows of ancient practices has much more to uncover. Moving forward, we step into the intricate and painful world of foot binding in ancient China, a practice that persisted for nearly 1,000 years. Emerging during the Tang dynasty in the 10th century, foot binding was rooted in ideals of beauty, status, and matrimonial desirability. The so-called lotus feet, measuring as little as 3 inches, were seen as the ultimate symbol of feminine grace and elegance. But achieving this so-called beauty came at an unimaginable cost. The process began when girls as young as 5 were subjected to the excruciating ritual. Their feet were soaked in hot water, their toes bent under the sole, and the arch forcefully broken, all while being tightly bound with cloth to stunt growth. This crushing process left women in constant pain, causing infections, deformations, and even disabilities. Yet, in a society where small feet were equated with high status and a bright future, many families were willing to endure this agony for their daughters, hoping it would secure a favorable marriage or elevate their social standing. By the early 20th century, however, winds of change began to blow. Cultural shifts, modernization, and increased Western influence brought severe criticism to this practice. Reformers denounced it as inhumane, and movements arose to abandon foot binding altogether. Eventually, it faded into history, leaving behind a complex legacy, a reminder of the extreme lengths societies have gone to in defining beauty and status. And as we leave this world of bound feet and unthinkable pain, another chapter in the tapestry of ancient practices beckons our attention. Now turning to the brutal and bewildering practice of trial by ordeal, we uncover a legal system steeped in superstition and fear. Imagine this: a person accused of a crime is not judged by evidence or testimony, but by their ability to endure extreme physical trials believed to reveal divine judgment. In medieval Europe, one common ordeal involved the accused walking barefoot across red-hot iron. The belief was simple yet chilling. If their wounds miraculously healed within a few days, it was seen as a sign of innocence. If not, their guilt was deemed undeniable. Another method, often referred to as the trial by water, required the accused to be dunked into a body of water. If they floated, it was believed they had been rejected by the water and were thus guilty. On the contrary, sinking meant innocence, though the risk of drowning was a grim consequence of proving one's virtue. These trials were not exclusive to Europe. The ancient Hindu laws of Manu also describe ordeals like plunging a hand into boiling oil or retrieving items from a pot filled with venomous snakes, with divine intervention expected to protect the innocent. These practices, rooted in the deep superstition that the gods or supernatural forces would expose the truth, often placed the accused in situations where survival itself was a miracle. Over time, however, as societies evolved and rational thought began to challenge old beliefs, these ordeals gradually lost their place in legal systems. The rise of structured, evidence-based judiciary processes replaced these dreadful trials, marking a significant milestone in humanity's pursuit of justice. Yet, the echoes of such practices remind us of a time when fear and mysticism shaped the fate of the accused. And as the shadow of divine judgment fades, let us now delve deeper into another harrowing chapter in the world of forbidden customs. As the next chapter of forbidden customs unfolds, we arrive at the disturbing ritual of Sati, an ancient practice that demanded unimaginable sacrifice. This ritual required a Hindu widow to immolate herself on her deceased husband's funeral pyre, an act believed to showcase ultimate devotion and secure her spiritual salvation alongside her husband in the afterlife. Rooted deeply in societal beliefs, Sati was viewed as the pinnacle of marital loyalty, where the widow's self-sacrifice was said to cleanse her family's sins and elevate her honor to divine levels. However, beneath these lofty ideals lay the grim reality of coerced compliance and unbearable societal pressure, particularly for young widows who often had no choice in the matter. Historical records from the British colonial era in India contain chilling accounts of this practice. One prominent example is the case of Raja Nand Kumar's widow, whose self-immolation in the late 18th century drew attention to the devastating human toll of this custom. The horrific image of a woman leaping into roaring flames captured the skepticism of many British officials, leading to debates about morality and governance. Over time, mounting outrage from reformers like Raja Ram Mohan Roy, who vehemently opposed the practice, sparked an undeniable call for change. Their efforts, combined with the growing influence of British laws that condemned the act, led to the eventual abolition of Sati in the mid-1800s. This marked the beginning of a cultural shift, though isolated cases persisted in defiance of the law. Today, the memory of Sati stands as a solemn reminder of the extremes to which societal norms can push individuals. And as we pause to reflect on the flames of this dark tradition, let us move forward to uncover another chapter in the labyrinth of ancient forbidden practices. Moving forward, we step into the realm of ancient medical practices with the curious yet unsettling methods of bloodletting and trepanation. Bloodletting, a procedure believed to balance the body's so-called humors, was practiced by civilizations like the Egyptians, Greeks, and medieval Europeans. These humors, thought to govern health and emotions, included blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile, and any imbalance was seen as the root cause of illness. Physicians of the time would use tools like lancets or specially designed cups to draw blood from patients, convinced this would restore harmony within the body. Despite the lack of scientific evidence, bloodletting remained a widespread practice for thousands of years, used to treat everything from headaches to fever and even the plague. On the other side of ancient medicine lies trepanation, a procedure that involved drilling or scraping a hole into the human skull. This practice, dating back to prehistoric times, was believed to release evil spirits thought to cause mental illnesses or severe headaches. In some cases, trepanation was even used to treat head injuries, though the risks of infection or death were alarmingly high. Remarkably, evidence from archaeological findings shows that some individuals survived these procedures, as indicated by signs of bone healing around the drilled openings. While both bloodletting and trepanation strike modern minds as gruesome and misguided, they were revolutionary in their time, reflecting humanity's relentless quest to understand and heal the body, no matter how primitive the methods. These practices, though now obsolete, laid a foundation for the development of modern medical science by inspiring questions about the human body and its mysteries. As we leave behind these early attempts at medicine, we delve next into an arena of ancient brutality that served as both punishment and entertainment: gladiatorial combat in ancient Rome. Moving forward, we arrive at the heart of ancient Rome, where the brutal spectacle of gladiatorial combat reigned supreme. These bloody contests, held in grand amphitheaters like the iconic Colosseum, were not only a source of entertainment but also a powerful symbol of Roman dominance and societal order. Gladiators, often comprising slaves, prisoners of war, and condemned criminals, were trained to fight to the death, wielding swords, tridents, and other weapons as the roaring crowd demanded either mercy or execution. These matches were far more than mere entertainment. They reflected the values of a society that revered strength, discipline, and conquest. The games served as a tool to reinforce the authority of the Roman state, offering citizens a visceral reminder of its power and the consequences of defiance. However, the appeal of these spectacles was not universal. As time went on, shifting religious and moral beliefs began to challenge the very foundations of gladiatorial combat. The rise of Christianity, in particular, played a pivotal role in questioning the ethics of using human lives for public amusement. Early Christian leaders condemned the games as barbaric and incompatible with their teachings of compassion and the sanctity of life. This growing opposition, combined with political and economic changes within the empire, led to the gradual decline of gladiatorial games. By the 5th century, these once celebrated contests had faded into history, leaving behind only the ruins of amphitheaters and the stories of those who fought within them. As we step away from the blood-soaked sands of the arena, our journey now takes us to another grim chapter in human history, where punishment doubled as a public spectacle, and society gathered to witness the chilling rituals of public executions. Now turning to the somber world of public executions, we uncover a practice that combined punishment with spectacle, drawing large crowds in societies spanning from medieval Europe to colonial America. These grim events were not just acts of justice, but also powerful displays of authority meant to instill fear and deter crime. Methods of execution varied widely, ranging from swift and decisive beheadings with a gleaming axe or guillotine to the slow and agonizing torment of breaking on the wheel, where the condemned would endure excruciating pain as their limbs were shattered. Hanging was particularly common, with gallows becoming a grim centerpiece in village squares or bustling towns, where spectators would gather in morbid fascination. In some cases, executions were paired with additional punishments, such as the condemned being drawn and quartered or tarred and displayed as a warning to others. The crowds that flocked to these events were motivated by a mix of fear, curiosity, and sometimes even entertainment, as executions evolved into macabre public gatherings. Vendors sold refreshments, families attended as if it were a community event, and society normalized the spectacle of death as an integral part of justice. Yet, these practices were not merely about punishment. They were about reinforcing societal order and demonstrating the power of the ruling class, sending a clear message of what awaited those who dared to defy the law. Over time, however, shifting values began to cast doubt on the morality and efficacy of such punishments. Philosophers, humanitarians, and reformists questioned the ethics of using death as a public deterrent, arguing that these displays often desensitized society to violence rather than curbing it. The Enlightenment era in particular sparked debates about human dignity and justice, leading to a widespread reevaluation of corporal punishment. By the 19th and 20th centuries, public executions were gradually abolished in many parts of the world, replaced by more private forms of justice that aligned with emerging notions of human rights and compassion. And now, leaving behind the grim stages of the gallows and guillotine, our exploration moves into a different realm of ritual and belief, where the sacred and the profane intertwined in practices that honored ancient gods and sought divine blessing. Moving forward, we delve into the enigmatic practice of sacred prostitution, an ancient custom where physical intimacy was intertwined with divine worship. In the temples of Mesopotamia, Greece, and India, this ritual was regarded as a sacred act meant to honor deities and secure their blessings. Participants, often priestesses or temple devotees, would engage in these acts as a form of spiritual offering, believed to invoke fertility, prosperity, and favor from the gods. The practice was deeply rooted in cultural and religious beliefs, with sacred sites serving as the focal point for rituals that blended the earthly with the divine. In ancient Mesopotamia, for instance, the goddess Ishtar, associated with love and fertility, was venerated through these ceremonies. Similarly, in certain parts of India, temple dancers known as Devadasis were dedicated to the service of deities, performing rituals that were considered both artistic and spiritual in nature. These customs were often steeped in symbolism, with the act representing the union of human and divine forces, a reenactment of myths that celebrated creation and abundance. The temples themselves were adorned with carvings and art that depicted these rituals, reflecting their societal significance. Yet, as time wore on, the perception of sacred prostitution began to shift. The rise of monotheistic religions like Christianity and Islam introduced new moral frameworks that condemned such practices as immoral and indecent. Religious reform movements and changing societal values further contributed to its decline, as communities moved away from rituals that blurred the lines between sacred devotion and human desire. Eventually, the practice disappeared almost entirely, leaving behind only historical accounts and traces in ancient art and architecture. Today, the ruins of temples and their intricate carvings serve as a silent reminder of a time when spirituality and human connection were woven together in ways that modern society often finds incomprehensible. From these sacred halls of history, we now turn our attention to another ancient custom that tested the boundaries of morality and survival, one that brought humanity face to face with both its fears and its primal instincts. As the next challenge unfolds, we encounter the stark and unsettling Spartan practice of infant exposure, a custom deeply tied to their militaristic way of life. In ancient Sparta, a society built on discipline, strength, and unwavering loyalty to the state, physical perfection was not just valued, it was demanded. Newborns deemed weak, deformed, or incapable of contributing to the rigorous ideals of Spartan society were subjected to a harrowing fate. These infants were abandoned on the slopes of Mount Taygetus, left to succumb to the elements. This practice was not born of cruelty for its own sake, but rather a reflection of the Spartan belief that only the strongest individuals could uphold and protect their city-state. To understand this tradition is to grasp the Spartan ethos, where the collective good far outweighed individual well-being. From a young age, children were conditioned to endure physical and mental challenges, preparing them for a lifetime of service in the Spartan army. The exposure of infants who did not meet their exacting standards was viewed as an extension of this philosophy, a stark and pragmatic strategy to ensure societal resilience. However, it also reflects the darker side of this otherwise celebrated civilization, showing how their pursuit of strength eclipsed compassion. Over time, such practices have become unthinkable as moral and ethical values have evolved to cherish and protect human life in all its forms. Modern principles of equality and inclusivity starkly contrast with the brutal efficiency of Spartan society. Today, the rugged terrain of Mount Taygetus remains a haunting symbol of a time when survival and societal ideals dictated the very right to exist. As we leave behind this harsh chapter of human history, we move toward another ancient practice, one that pushes the boundaries of cultural norms while exploring humanity's complex relationship with power, strength, and survival. Now turning to another chilling chapter of human history, we delve into the practice of ritualistic cannibalism, a custom that thrived in various ancient societies but is now considered one of the ultimate taboos. Among the Aztecs, cannibalism held profound spiritual significance, often intertwined with their complex religious beliefs. It was not driven solely by necessity or malice, but by a conviction that consuming the flesh of a sacrificed individual could transfer their strength, courage, or other admirable qualities to the living. This belief was deeply rooted in their worldview, where the gods demanded human offerings to sustain the cosmos, and consumption of the sacrificed was seen as a sacred continuation of this cycle. Certain Pacific Islander tribes also engaged in similar practices, where ritual cannibalism was viewed as a means to honor the dead or absorb their mana, a spiritual energy believed to enhance the life force of those who partook. These customs, while horrifying by today's standards, were expressions of deeply held cultural values and spiritual frameworks that gave meaning to the act. However, as human societies evolved and global interaction increased, the perception of cannibalism shifted dramatically. Contact with external civilizations and the spread of monotheistic religions introduced new moral and ethical standards that vehemently opposed these practices. The act of consuming human flesh became synonymous with savagery and barbarism, its ritualistic origins forgotten or dismissed. The cultural logic that once underpinned these customs faded into obscurity, replaced by universal principles of human dignity and sanctity. Today, references to ritualistic cannibalism evoke horror and fascination in equal measure, offering a stark reminder of the diverse and often unsettling ways humanity has sought to understand life, death, and the divine. With the echoes of these practices still lingering in artifacts and oral traditions, this chapter of history bridges the past with powerful lessons about cultural evolution. As we move forward, we'll uncover yet another ancient tradition, one that blurs the lines between power, morality, and deeply ingrained customs. Moving forward, we step into the unsettling world of child marriages, a practice that was once widespread across ancient and medieval societies. For centuries, the union of children in marriage was driven by strategic motives rather than personal choice or love. Families often arranged these alliances to strengthen political ties, secure economic stability, or ensure the continuation of family lineage. In medieval Europe, noble families commonly married off their children to forge alliances that could consolidate power and extend influence. This practice wasn't confined to one region. In India, child marriages were deeply rooted in social and economic traditions, often tied to preserving caste and community customs. Similarly, in parts of Africa, these unions were often seen as a means to protect family honor or alleviate poverty through the exchange of dowries. While these marriages might have been seen as necessary or even honorable in the context of their times, the consequences for the young brides were often devastating. Stripped of their childhoods, many suffered emotionally, physically, and mentally as they were thrust prematurely into the roles of wife and mother. Over time, as global understanding of human rights expanded, child marriages began to attract widespread condemnation. Movements advocating for education, personal autonomy, and gender equality highlighted how this age-old practice perpetuated inequality and restricted opportunities for young girls. Laws were enacted and campaigns launched to combat the practice, particularly in regions where cultural and economic pressures still drive its persistence. Today, child marriages are widely recognized as a violation of basic human rights, and efforts to eliminate this practice continue on an international scale. Organizations and activists work tirelessly to educate communities, enforce legal protections, and empower girls to choose their own futures. While progress has been made, the fight to end child marriages is far from over. Understanding this complex issue not only sheds light on past societal structures, but also underscores the ongoing journey toward a more just and equitable world. As we leave this chapter behind, we step into a different realm of historical curiosities, unearthing a peculiar myth of ancient excess and opulence. Now turning to the fascinating legend of the Roman vomitorium, we unravel a myth that has persisted for centuries. Contrary to popular belief, the vomitorium was not a designated room where Romans would purge themselves to continue feasting. This long-held misconception likely stems from the term itself, which sounds like it refers to the act of vomiting. However, the reality is far less grotesque and far more practical. A vomitorium was actually a cleverly designed architectural feature in Roman amphitheaters and stadiums. These were passageways or exits that allowed large crowds to spill out of a venue quickly and efficiently after a performance or event. The word originates from the Latin verb vomere, meaning to spew forth, but in this context it referred to the flow of people rather than to any bodily function. As we debunk this myth, it's worth exploring the true extravagance of Roman feasting culture, which likely contributed to the misunderstanding. Ancient Roman banquets were lavish affairs, often lasting for hours and featuring an endless variety of dishes, from exotic meats to elaborate desserts. Guests reclined on couches in specially designed dining rooms, indulging in multiple courses while servants attended to their every need. What truly sets Roman feasts apart was the emphasis on presentation and abundance, with some hosts using these gatherings as displays of wealth and social status. While some ancient texts hint at excessive indulgence, including overeating and drinking to the point of discomfort, there is no evidence suggesting that Romans routinely purged themselves as part of their dining rituals. The myth of the vomitorium, though false, speaks to our fascination with the extremes of Roman decadence. It serves as a reminder to separate historical fact from fiction and to appreciate the ingenuity and cultural richness of ancient Rome. With this myth unraveled, we delve next into another peculiar chapter of history, examining the strange and often whimsical practice of putting animals on trial in medieval Europe. Now turning to the outlandish medieval practice of animal trials, we encounter one of the most peculiar chapters in human history. Imagine a world where animals, much like humans, were held accountable for their actions in a court of law. Such trials were not rare in medieval Europe, where pigs, cows, goats, and even insects were prosecuted for offenses ranging from property damage to outright murder. These cases were treated with surprising seriousness, complete with formal charges, legal representation, and even witnesses. One infamous example involves a pig that was sentenced to death by hanging after being found guilty of killing a child in 1386 in France. The pig was dressed in human clothing and publicly executed, underscoring the bizarre anthropomorphic treatment of these animals. Another case involved a swarm of locusts being summoned to court for destroying crops, with the proceedings culminating in a bizarre attempt to excommunicate the insect. The rationale behind these trials stemmed from the deeply religious and superstitious beliefs of the time. Many people saw animals as moral beings capable of sin and wrongdoing, and punishing them was thought to uphold divine justice and maintain social order. This practice also reflected humanity's desire to impose a sense of control and morality over the natural world, even when it led to absurd extremes. Over time, as legal systems evolved and rationality began to prevail, Such practices were abandoned, viewed as relics of a superstitious past. However, these trials remain a fascinating glimpse into the complexities of medieval thought, highlighting the lengths to which societies would go to enforce their understanding of justice. With this peculiar practice explored, we now shift our focus to a more personal and enigmatic form of ancient expression, examining the use of curse tablets in ancient Greece and Rome. Now turning to the mysterious and deeply personal practice of curse tablets in ancient Greece and Rome, we uncover a form of expression that was as enigmatic as it was vengeful. Imagine holding a small, thin sheet of lead, carefully inscribed with a plea to the divine, asking for intervention against your adversary. These curse tablets, often placed in tombs, wells, or sanctuaries, were believed to channel the will of the gods or spirits to inflict misfortune upon a rival. Their purposes varied greatly, from seeking revenge in personal disputes to influencing the outcomes of love affairs, and even gaining an edge in competitive arenas like business and sports. For instance, a merchant might curse a competitor to ensure their own success, or a spurned lover could inscribe a tablet pleading for an unfaithful partner to suffer heartbreak. The inscriptions were often detailed and vivid, leaving little to the imagination. Some requested mild annoyances, while others called for their target to endure significant suffering. It was not uncommon to see phrases wishing for someone to lose their voice, health, or fortune. These tablets served as a way for individuals to confront their grievances indirectly, relying on supernatural forces to settle scores when direct action seemed impossible. The act of burying or hiding the tablet in sacred or liminal spaces was thought to activate its power, ensuring the gods or spirits would hear the plea. This practice, however, began to decline as religious and philosophical perspectives shifted. With the rise of organized religions like Christianity and changes in moral values, the use of such artifacts came to be seen as superstitious and morally questionable. The growing emphasis on forgiveness and divine judgment over personal vengeance made the creation and use of curse tablets increasingly rare. Over time, they faded into history, leaving behind only the artifacts themselves as a testament to the complex and often darker aspects of ancient human emotions and spirituality. Now, from invoking the wrath of the divine, we move to desperate attempts to combat invisible foes, exploring the peculiar remedies and superstitions surrounding pandemics like the Black Death. Now, as the next phase of our journey unfolds, we delve into the desperate and often bizarre efforts to combat the devastating pandemics of history, focusing on the peculiar remedies and superstitions that emerged during plagues like the Black Death. At the height of the outbreak, fear and uncertainty gripped societies, and without a clear understanding of how diseases spread, people turned to unconventional and often ineffective practices. Burning herbs, for example, became common in an attempt to cleanse the air of what were believed to be deadly miasmas or foul vapors thought to carry the plague. Entire villages would be engulfed in the smoke of aromatic plants, while individuals wore perfumed masks, not only as a measure of self-protection, but also as a way to mask the overwhelming stench of death and decay. Another widespread method involved self-flagellation, where groups of people would march through the streets whipping themselves in an effort to atone for sins, believing that the plague was divine punishment. This practice, while fervent and emotional, not only failed to mitigate the spread of disease but often worsened it by creating open wounds that increased susceptibility to infection. Similarly, people consumed elaborate potions and bizarre concoctions, such as those made from ground gemstones or precious metals, believing in their mystical curative properties. These mixtures were expensive and often resulted in agonizing side effects, but offered no genuine protection against the invisible enemy. Desperation also led to the rise of scapegoating. In some communities, minority groups or individuals practicing unfamiliar customs were blamed for causing the outbreak, leading to tragic social consequences, including violent persecutions. These misguided attempts to regain control in a time of chaos reflected the depth of fear and the lengths people would go to for answers in an era where science was yet to displace superstition. As centuries passed, these practices gradually gave way to an understanding rooted in science, with advancements in medicine and the discovery of pathogens marking a turning point in humanity's battle against disease. But these old remedies, though ineffective, remain as a stark reminder of the human tendency to seek meaning and solutions in the face of overwhelming uncertainty. With that reflection, we now shift from disease and desperation to another deeply ingrained practice, one rooted in tradition and alliances, as we explore the history of child marriages in ancient and medieval societies. Now turning to the expanded discussion on human sacrifices, we uncover how the roots of these harrowing rituals often intertwined with both political strategies and deeply held spiritual convictions. In the ancient Incan Empire, child sacrifices, known as capacocha, were performed during momentous occasions such as the crowning of an emperor or in response to natural disasters. These sacrifices were believed to ensure the favor of the gods, maintain harmony, and protect the empire from further calamities. Chosen children, often considered the most beautiful and pure, were honored as offerings seen to bridge the human and divine. They were pampered and celebrated before their ultimate fate, a tragic reflection of both reverence and brutality woven into the fabric of Incan society. The Viking ritual of the blood eagle stands as another haunting example, though its historical accuracy remains debated. According to accounts, this method involved carving the victim's back, breaking the ribs from the spine, and pulling the lungs out to resemble wings. A gruesome spectacle thought to appease Odin and demonstrate the perpetrator's fearlessness. Whether purely myth or reality, the blood eagle symbolizes the extremes to which rituals were shaped by the pursuit of spiritual and societal approval, often reflecting the values of courage, sacrifice, and devotion to higher powers. Religious beliefs weren't the sole drivers of these acts. Societal pressures and political motives also played significant roles. Human sacrifices were frequently used as displays of power, reinforcing the authority of rulers or priests by showcasing their supposed connection to divine will. For example, the Aztecs, whose mass sacrifices at their great temples became legendary, believed that their gods required human hearts to sustain the cosmos. These rituals, attended by thousands, served as both spiritual devotion and a chilling political statement, reminding neighboring communities of the empire's dominance and its rulers' indispensable role in maintaining universal balance. While today such customs evoke horror and disbelief, they were shaped by the cultural, religious, and political contexts of their time. They underline how deeply humanity once believed in the necessity of bloodshed to bring order to chaos, to connect with the divine, or to maintain social cohesion. As we leave these somber reflections, the next chapter leads us to another judicially intertwined practice where superstition met punishment, the phenomenon of trial by ordeal. Moving forward, let us delve deeper into the expanded discussion on trial by ordeal, a practice where faith in divine justice intertwined with legal systems dominated by superstition. The notion that the gods or higher powers would intervene to reveal truth and innocence was the cornerstone of these trials, often subjecting the accused to grueling tests of physical endurance or survival. One striking example is the river ordeal from ancient Babylonian law. Here, an accused individual was thrown into a river. If they sank, it was interpreted as a sign of guilt, while survival was deemed divine proof of innocence. Such practices were rooted in the belief that water, as a sacred and purifying element, would reject the wicked but embrace the virtuous. These trials placed not only the accused but also the community's faith in the hands of elements believed to be guided by divine will. In medieval Europe, variations of these ordeals became prominent. The trial by hot iron, where an accused person was tasked with carrying a red hot iron bar over a specific distance, was based on the idea that the absence of burns or the rapid healing of wounds would signify innocence. Equally harrowing was the ordeal of boiling water, in which individuals plunged their hands into scalding liquid to retrieve an object, their injuries scrutinized for signs of guilt or vindication. These rituals were designed to compel divine forces to manifest judgment, reinforcing societal norms that intertwined moral conduct with spiritual belief. It is important to recognize that these practices did not merely reflect faith, but also acted as tools of power and control. Authorities used these ordeals to reinforce the idea that they operated under divine mandate, presenting their judgments as guided by higher forces rather than human fallibility. This not only reinforced the legitimacy of rulers or the clergy, but also instilled fear and compliance among the populace who believed in the infallibility of divine justice. Over time, as societies advanced and rational thought gained prominence, these ordeals were criticized for their inherent injustice and unpredictability. The belief that such cruel tests could reveal truth began to wane, replaced by more structured legal systems rooted in evidence and reason. However, the era of trial by ordeal remains a fascinating lens into how humanity once desperately sought to intertwine spirituality, morality, and law. With this insight into the blending of superstition and judicial practice, we now turn to a deeply unsettling ancient tradition that sought to bind devotion and sacrifice, the ritual of Sati in ancient Hindu society. Now turning to the expanded discussion on Sati, we dive deeper into one of history's most controversial and tragic customs, the ritual of Sati, where a widow was expected to immolate herself on her deceased husband's funeral pyre, symbolized an extreme form of devotion and sacrifice. Rooted in ancient Hindu traditions, Sati was often glorified as the ultimate act of loyalty, elevating the widow's status to that of a divine figure. However, behind this idealized portrayal lay layers of societal pressure, gender inequality, and deeply entrenched patriarchal norms. One of the most well-known cases often linked to the practice is the story of Queen Padmini during the siege of Chittorgarh. According to historical accounts and legends, as invaders closed in on the fortress, Padmini and other women of the court performed johar, an act of mass self-immolation to avoid capture and dishonor. While not exactly Sati in the traditional sense, this event has often been associated with the same ideals of sacrificial virtue and honor tied to the broader practice. Stories like these were romanticized over centuries, reinforcing the notion of self-immolation as a noble and dignified act. Yet for many, Sati was far from voluntary. Widows, often left in a precarious social position after their husband's death, faced overwhelming familial and societal expectations to conform. The act was seen as a way to maintain familial honor and secure spiritual blessings for the departed soul. Those who chose to resist Sati frequently faced stigma, isolation, or worse. This paints a darker reality of the practice, contrasting sharply with its glorified image in certain traditions and folklore. Efforts to abolish Sati gained momentum during the British colonial period in India, when reformers like Raja Ram Mohan Roy spearheaded campaigns to end the practice. Highlighting stories of coercion and the inhumanity of the act, reformers argued against Sati as a violation of human dignity and an outdated interpretation of religious texts. The eventual legal ban in the early 19th century marked a turning point, symbolizing a broader movement toward rethinking cultural and gender norms. What makes the debate around Sati so complex is the tension between those who revered it as a sacred duty and those who condemned it as a practice rooted in oppression. On one side were individuals who believed that Sati granted the widow and her family spiritual salvation and eternal honor. On the other were reformers and survivors who exposed the societal pressures and violence behind the ritual, arguing that no act of devotion should require such a horrific sacrifice. The practice of Sati, while largely eradicated, serves as a stark reminder of how cultural traditions can intertwine with religion and power, often at the expense of human lives. Through its eventual abolition, we are reminded of the importance of questioning practices that perpetuate harm under the guise of faith or tradition. With this poignant reflection, let us now transition to another ancient practice that left its own unsettling mark on history: the disturbing medical customs of bloodletting and trepanation. Now turning to the expanded discussion on gladiatorial combat, we uncover how these brutal spectacles were more than just entertainment in ancient Rome. They were a powerful reflection of the empire's societal values and political dynamics. Gladiatorial games symbolized the might and control of the Roman state, offering a theatrical display of life and death that captivated audiences across all social classes, from the common citizens to the emperor himself. These events were not merely fights, they were intricate, orchestrated performances that demonstrated Rome's ideals of courage, discipline, and superiority. One of the most compelling figures associated with gladiatorial combat is Spartacus, a Thracian gladiator who led a massive slave revolt against the Roman Republic in the 1st century BC. Trained in the harsh conditions of a gladiatorial school, Spartacus used his knowledge of combat and strategy to challenge the Roman establishment, gaining the support of tens of thousands of slaves. His rebellion shook the foundations of Roman society, highlighting the contradictions in an empire that prided itself on civilization while exploiting human lives for spectacle and labor. Though ultimately defeated, Spartacus and his followers left an indelible mark on history, embodying the resilience and defiance of those who dared to resist oppression. The decline of gladiatorial combat began as the Roman Empire underwent a cultural and religious transformation. With the rise of Christianity, attitudes toward these blood-soaked games began to shift. Christian teachings, which emphasized compassion and the sanctity of life, stood in stark contrast to the violent ethos of the arena. Prominent Christian leaders and thinkers condemned the games as barbaric and incompatible with the values of their faith. Over time, as Christianity gained influence within the empire, these moral objections culminated in the eventual abolition of gladiatorial combat by the 5th century. The story of gladiatorial games is a testament to the complexities of human history, where acts of unimaginable brutality coexisted with profound cultural and political significance. It forces us to reflect on how societies construct their values and the often painful process of questioning and dismantling traditions that no longer align with evolving ethical standards. With this in mind, let us now move forward to explore another widespread practice that blurred the lines between punishment and public spectacle: the unsettling tradition of public executions. Now turning to the expanded discussion on sacred prostitution, we uncover how this ancient practice intertwined with concepts of divinity, fertility, and the spiritual life of early societies. Sacred prostitution, seen in civilizations like Mesopotamia, ancient Greece, and India, was not merely an act of physical intimacy but a deeply symbolic ritual believed to bridge the human and the divine. It was rooted in the belief that sexual union within a sacred space could appease deities, ensure agricultural prosperity, and promote fertility among the people. Temples dedicated to goddesses of love and fertility, such as Ishtar in Mesopotamia or Aphrodite in Greece, often housed individuals who engaged in these practices as part of their religious duties. Far from being stigmatized, these participants were regarded with reverence, as their actions were thought to hold cosmic significance. This ritualistic act became a recurring theme in ancient art and literature, often celebrated through intricate carvings, hymns, and mythologies that emphasized the sanctity of human connection as a divine offering. For instance, Mesopotamian texts contain hymns praising the sacred union between priestesses and their goddess, portraying these rituals as acts of profound devotion rather than personal indulgence. Similarly, ancient Greek poetry at times depicted temple courtesans as intermediaries between mortals and the gods, granting blessings through their sacred roles. However, as monotheistic religions began to rise, they brought with them a new set of moral codes and beliefs that starkly contrasted with these ancient traditions. The emphasis on chastity, personal sin, and a singular divine authority often led to the denouncement of practices like sacred prostitution. Leaders of these emerging faiths condemned it as immoral and incompatible with the values of their teachings, sparking a gradual decline in its acceptance and prevalence. By the time monotheistic religions like Christianity and Islam firmly established their influence, sacred prostitution had become a relic of the past, its temples and rituals fading into obscurity. The story of sacred prostitution serves as a fascinating lens through which we can examine early human spirituality and societal structures. It highlights how cultural norms and religious practices evolve, reflecting the shifting beliefs and priorities of civilizations over time. With this understanding, let us now delve into another ancient tradition that reveals humanity's darker side, a practice that sought to alter the natural order through the ritualistic act of cannibalism. Now turning to the expanded discussion on cannibalistic rituals, we uncover a practice that intertwines both the spiritual and the extreme necessities of survival. In many ancient societies, ritualistic cannibalism was believed to serve a profound purpose, often rooted in religious or cultural symbolism. Among the Aztecs, for example, the ritual consumption of human flesh was closely tied to their belief in sustaining cosmic balance. Victims, often prisoners of war, were sacrificed as offerings to the gods, and portions of their bodies were subsequently consumed as part of sacred ceremonies. This act was thought to imbue the participants with the strength and divine essence of the sacrificed individual, a practice that underscored their reverence for the gods and their belief in the interconnection of life and death. In contrast, survival-based cannibalism emerged in dire circumstances where the instinct to preserve life overshadowed social taboos. The infamous case of the Donner Party in the mid-19th century exemplifies this grim reality. Stranded in the harsh winter conditions of the Sierra Nevada mountains, members of this ill-fated group resorted to consuming the deceased to endure starvation. Unlike the ritualistic cannibalism of the Aztecs, which carried deep cultural and spiritual significance, survival cannibalism was driven purely by necessity, an act of desperation rather than devotion. Despite the starkly different contexts, both forms of cannibalism reveal the lengths to which humans have gone to confront mortality and adapt to extreme conditions throughout history. The duality of these practices reflects the complex nature of human behavior and the intricate ways societal norms are shaped by circumstances, whether spiritual beliefs or survival instincts. As we examine these contrasting forms of cannibalism, we gain a deeper understanding of the cultural and environmental pressures that have influenced human actions over time. With this thought-provoking exploration in mind, let us journey into another unsettling yet historically significant practice, the tradition of child marriages, an ancient custom that reveals humanity's ongoing struggle to balance tradition with evolving values. Now turning to the expanded discussion on plague cures, we delve into a chapter of history marked by desperation, fear, and the lengths to which societies went to ward off devastating pandemics. During periods like the Black Death in the 14th century, people faced a crisis they neither understood scientifically nor could control. This lack of knowledge gave rise to an array of bizarre and often dangerous remedies, fueled by fear and superstition rather than reason. Burning aromatic herbs, for example, was thought to purify the air and drive away the disease. People carried bouquets of flowers or spices, believing that the pleasant scents would shield them from infection, a practice immortalized in the nursery rhyme, "Ring Around the Rosie." Others turned to more extreme measures such as self-flagellation, where groups of individuals would march through towns while whipping themselves, hoping their acts of penance would atone for societal sins and end the plague's wrath. However, these strange remedies were not limited to personal rituals. Entire communities sought scapegoats to explain the inexplicable, often targeting marginalized groups. Jewish populations in particular faced brutal persecution, as baseless accusations of poisoning wells or spreading the plague incited violence against them. This paranoia led to widespread massacres, further exacerbating the societal chaos caused by the disease. Similarly, women accused of witchcraft were burned at the stake, thought to be in league with sinister forces spreading illness. These actions reflect the collective desperation of societies grappling with a life or death crisis, but they also highlight the darker side of human behavior. Fear, when unchecked, can lead to irrationality and cruelty, with devastating consequences for the most vulnerable. While many of these so-called cures and responses may seem absurd or horrifying today, they underscore the profound impact of ignorance and panic during times of widespread suffering. From the burning of herbs to the burning of lives, these practices reveal how societies confronted their deepest fears in a world without the guiding hand of modern science. With this haunting exploration of plague remedies behind us, let us now move forward to examine another deeply unsettling historical custom: the practice of child marriages, which sheds light on the intersection of tradition, power, and evolving societal values. Now turning to the expanded discussion on child marriages, we unravel a practice deeply rooted in historical traditions yet fraught with ethical dilemmas and human rights concerns. In ancient and medieval societies, child marriages were often viewed as pragmatic arrangements, crafted to secure political alliances, consolidate wealth, or continue family lineages. These unions, which frequently involved young girls married to significantly older men, were driven by cultural norms and economic factors rather than considerations for the well-being of the children involved. For instance, in 19th century Britain, child marriages were still legally permissible until societal reformers pushed for changes in the age of consent. Influential campaigns eventually led to the passage of laws like the 1885 Criminal Law Amendment Act, which raised the age of consent to 16, marking a pivotal shift towards protecting children from exploitation. Similarly, in South Asia, child marriages have a long and complex history tied to both tradition and socioeconomic conditions. The implementation of laws such as the Prohibition of Child Marriage Act in India, first enforced in 1929 and later amended, reflects ongoing efforts to address this deeply ingrained practice. Despite legal prohibitions and increasing awareness, such marriages persist in some rural and impoverished areas due to factors like poverty, lack of education, and societal pressures. These regions often see child marriages as a way to reduce financial burdens or safeguard daughters in environments perceived as unsafe. What makes child marriages particularly complex is their intersection with cultural values and the slow pace of societal change. While some communities view these unions as a means of preserving tradition, others recognize them as a violation of fundamental human rights, denying children their freedom and opportunity to pursue education or build an independent future. Global initiatives spearheaded by organizations like the United Nations continue to advocate for stricter enforcement of child marriage laws and the empowerment of girls through education. Programs aimed at providing families with resources and alternatives have shown promise in breaking the cycle of this practice. The evolution of legal frameworks regarding child marriages highlights the tension between cultural preservation and the universal protection of children. This ongoing battle serves as a testament to how societies strive to reconcile their historical roots with the pressing need for progress and equality. As we examine how laws and mindsets surrounding child marriages continue to evolve, it invites us to ponder the broader challenge of balancing tradition with modern human rights. Transitioning from this discussion, we next delve into the fascinating myth and misunderstood reality of the Roman vomitorium, uncovering the truth behind one of history's most pervasive misconceptions. As we bring our exploration of these 15 forbidden ancient practices to a close, it is remarkable to reflect on how they illuminate humanity's journey of moral and ethical evolution. From the chilling realities of human sacrifices to the misunderstood myth of the Roman vomitorium, each practice tells a story of cultural norms shaped by necessity, belief, or tradition, and the eventual awakening to their consequences. These rituals, once integral to societies, now serve as reminders of how far we have come in questioning and redefining what is considered acceptable in the name of progress. Yet, this sparks an intriguing question. What current practices might future generations view with the same disbelief or horror as we regard these ancient customs? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Which practice shocked or fascinated you the most? Let us know. We love hearing your perspectives. And if you enjoyed this dive into the mysteries of the past, don't forget to like the video, share it with friends, and subscribe to our channel for more captivating insights into history's forgotten secrets. Hit that notification bell to stay updated on our latest uploads. Thank you for joining us on this fascinating journey through time. See you in the next video.